What's going on, everybody? Zack Rosenblatt here with Mike Kaye, the latest episode of the No Huddle Show, free agency edition. A lot has happened. A lot of other teams have spent a lot of money, and that does not include the Eagles, who have somehow, circumvented the salary cap as always, because Howie Roseman is just truly a wizard. It amazes me every year.
He is a guy that he just has foresight, right? So he is one of the few GMs in the league, it seems, that has foresight beyond just, oh yeah, this guy could be cut in 2 years. He really thinks this through. When he extends guys, when he reworks contracts, it's just one of those things that I think he does better than anybody else, and really he's become very good at it in the second time around. The first time around,
that year off was huge. Yeah,
the year off was huge. You look at some of the deals that he made kind of in that first round. There were some good deals and there were some good trades, but this he's putting on a clinic with how to work contracts, how to work trades, how to sign free agents in general. I just think he's a really smart GM this second time around. That said, there's plenty of room to criticize that first time around.
He hasn't been perfect since then either. His thought process is so much different than everybody else's.
Yeah, and I think to be a successful general manager in the NFL, you have to come at things outside the box, because every single time the box gets filled with these good ideas, there's issues that sprout up. Everything changes. This game evolves. That's what I like about the NFL. It's not like the NBA or the MLB, where even though there's some rules, or even actually there's looser rules, guys get traded all the time. To truly win a trade in the NFL, you have to be creative.
At the Combine, I asked Howie Roseman, because they had a bunch of guys who we're going to get into one of them who are considering retirement. And so I asked him, so how do you plan for that? How do you go into an offseason? If a guy hasn't told you yet if he's coming back or not, how do you plan around that? And his answer wasn't necessarily directly tied to retirement. He was just always we're always thinking a few steps ahead. We're always looking ahead to 2020 and 2021. And you can just see that with the way he goes about his moves, the way he signs, the contracts he signs, the way they're structured. It either is a low cap hit now and they deal with it later and they kick the bucket down the road and they just always find a way around it, or you make it so it's more expensive now and it's cheaper later, so you have some money saved. And you can just tell, a lot of it, you can tell they're planning around the eventual Carson Wentz extension. That's certainly coming. Not this year. I think it's pretty clear that's not going to happen this year. These contracts, we were recording before and we had to stop because we saw on Twitter that Jordan Hicks just signed with the Arizona Cardinals for 4 years.
Monster deal.
$38 million total, I think. An average of pretty much $9 million per year. We don't know the year-to-year details, but that's a massive contract. The Eagles don't invest in linebackers, especially ones that are injury-prone. All respect to Jordan Hicks. He was good when he was healthy. But it's really just bad business giving that kind of contracts out. We're seeing the contracts that were given to C.J. Mosley and Landon Collins. These are positions the Eagles don't spend a lot of money on. They got Malcolm Jenkins. That was when Chip Kelly was still here, but they got him on a relatively cheap deal. He was kind of on the downswing. People weren't that high on him. Rodney McLeod, they gave a decent amount of money, but he's young and he has the potential to become a part of the defense. Those are the guys Howie invests in. He doesn't overspend on guys like Trent Brown. He doesn't overspend on guys that don't deserve the money. He sees how the market's working, and you can just tell that he bases this on value more than anything.
Yeah, and there are certain positions that you value, and he takes it from it's weird. He's very old school, and he's also very new school. New school, the mindset, Bill Polian actually kind of was big on this, is you don't play linebackers, you don't really play running backs. He did it once with Edgerrin James, but outside of that, you're not really investing in these guys because the positions are kind of replaceable.
Yeah. Even wide receiver now.
Right. A good middle linebacker is a really good asset to have. C.J. Mosley's a really, really good player.
But you can survive without it also.
Right. Most really good linebackers just are good against the run. You know what I mean? And so when you're weighing it, how big of a passing league this is, it's tough to invest in a middle linebacker. It's tough to invest in a strong safety unless you're the Redskins. That's what you're seeing happen, and it's you want to pay these great players, but also realize the value of their position. That's what I think is happening with Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell wants crazy money, and I'm sure he'll sign by the time the podcast even starts, but for a lot of teams in the league, I don't think he's got a huge market because you don't want to pay a running back like that when you have a guy like Josh Jacobs who can just come out and pretty much ball. And,
look at the Saints just signed Latavius Murray for a cheap 4-year deal, essentially saying we don't want to pay Mark Ingram, but he's probably going to demand on the open market. Let's get into the Eagles move, though. Let's talk about where they spent their money. We can go in order. The biggest one, it kind of happened really fast. There was a report that the Eagles were interested in Malik Jackson, and then before you knew it, he had signed to a 3-year, $30 million deal. We haven't seen the year-to-year average yet. I believe it's going to be less than $10 million that first year, actually, which is huge. He's a upgrade from Timmy Jernigan, I think. If you think about it, they essentially, Jernigan, if he hadn't broken his back mysteriously, he wouldn't have been able to restructure his contract. They would have been stuck with him. So instead, you're saving around $3 to $5 million on a better player.
Yeah, and
you obviously know about Malik from Jacksonville, so tell us what kind of player he is.
Yeah, why does this keep happening?
I know they're just going to keep doing this.
We call that the hashtag K pipeline. So Malik's an interesting player. He signed a record deal coming from Denver in 2016. And, he saw 3 years of it. I mean, that's a pretty solid, earnings for him and a solid free agent signing for Dave Caldwell. But what I like about Malik Jackson is you get a total package with him. You talk about leadership. He's that guy. He's outspoken. Fans are going to love him. But his play on the field speaks for itself. He can play 3 different positions. He can play... he can play 4. He can play 1 technique, 4 technique, 5 technique, 3 technique.
Any technique, he can do it.
Well, except for 9. But yes, he is a guy that can move around this defensive line. I think what I like about the marriage between him and Fletcher Cox is both of them demand double and triple teams at times, and so that means one of them is going to eat. I think Fletcher Cox could get 15 sacks this year because Malik Jackson is a guy that this team was missing. All due respect to Tim Jernigan, he's a massive pass rushing upgrade.
Yeah, I was going to say, just look at, Tim Jernigan didn't play almost all season, and then it took him time to get reacclimated. So you look at the guys Fletcher Cox is playing next to last year. Haloti Ngata, Trayvon Hester, who we like, but he's a rotational guy at best. Bruce Hector, even I don't know if he started, but there was games where he played a lot. They started the season with Destiny Vallejo as the starter. And Fletcher Cox still had 10 sacks and was utterly dominant. He was second only to Aaron Donald in pressures. If Aaron Donald doesn't exist, he's the Defensive Player of the Year candidate. And you're bringing in Malik Jackson. Derek Barnett. It's going to be important for him to have a good year. You have Brandon Graham coming back. This almost is a bigger move for Fletcher Cox than even just the Eagles as a whole, really. Fletcher Cox comes out of this feeling the best.
Well, and I think, too, you look at last year, we would sit in the press box and Fletcher Cox would go out for a couple of minutes with a foot injury or whatever.
Well, that's that Saints game.
Right. They didn't have a guy to replace him. Malik Jackson can replace him.
He can step in. Yeah.
He can step in. He can give you that pass rush. Interior pass rush, to me, is the most important thing in the NFL right now, outside of a really good quarterback, because if a quarterback can't step up in the pocket, you're done. So having Malik out there, Malik can also play strong side defensive end, which is helpful. He can do a little bit of what Mike Bennett does. He's a kind of a hybrid body. So I think that made a lot of sense. I think he is a good replacement for Tim Jernigan. I also think if they want to utilize his versatility, he could be very good replacing Michael Bennett. That said, though, they are not done at defensive tackle. They cannot be. Trayvon Hester, you and I are both, very complimentary.
He's a good third, fourth guy.
Yeah, he's a good third or fourth guy. They need to draft a guy in the first two rounds.
Yeah.
They really do.
This is a good defensive line. I think that was always their plan. I think the plan was always to get a veteran guy in there. I think Jackson's a little better than I thought they were going to get, honestly.
Yeah, for sure.
I thought they should target him, but, a lot of times you don't see them actually target the guys you think. But, all right, the next one was... Actually, no, we'll go a little more low-key because I think in terms of the timeline, this came first. Jason Peters signed a 1-year contract. He agreed to a pay cut, which we both thought he wouldn't. A pretty decent-sized pay cut. He was due to make $13 million this year. The new contract is 1 year, $10 million, only 5.5 of it guaranteed. I believe his cap hit's going to be something like $8 million or something this year, so they're saving a couple mil. That's pretty much best-case scenario for how this could have played out, because I thought it was going to come down to them being like, hey, if you don't take a pay cut, we have to move on. They were able to work it out. There weren't any better left tackles than him on the market. That's just the reality. And Trent Brown made a ridiculous amount of money that he did not deserve. He's fine left tackle, but he's not a $66 million over how many years it was.
Sorry.
The Raiders just have that cash.
I know we're trying not to breathe a lot, but that was worth an exhale right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this makes a lot of sense. I mean, he's a mid-level left tackle at this point in his career. He's getting paid mid-level left tackle money, and it kind of puts a finite end to his career. You know, this is his
the last one.
This is it. Like, you know...
Even if he doesn't want to admit it. Like,
right. And this is where you have to invest in that heir apparent. You have to.
Yeah. Or, I mean, this also allows you another year to figure out if Mailata can be that guy, but you have to bring in someone else to compete with him anyway.
I'm going to say bull hockey to that. You cannot go into this offseason.
Oh, no, I'm not saying he should be your only one, but
right.
you can find out now. Like, you get another year to develop him.
Well, I think he's very promising. I'm kind of sick of hearing about Jordan.
Yeah, I agree. He's a 7th-round pick.
Yeah, who never played.
Like,
yeah, so, like...
He's tantalizing, but, like, relax. Like, if he becomes something, then that was the best-case scenario.
He's your ninth offensive
If he ever starts a game, then you could be ecstatic about that draft pick.
Right, exactly. He's your ninth offensive lineman.
But now they're going to find out more over the next year whether he is that guy or not.
I remember when people were obsessed over Darryl Green.
Vitai's not that guy, by the way.
But I remember when people were obsessed about Darryl Green, and he barely, you know... Josh Andrews had a lot of positive buzz as a future starting guard and center. It didn't work out. Yeah. Offensive linemen are very weird. That said... I'm wondering, with the moves they've made this offseason, do you, like, the kid from Alabama State, Titus.
Yeah, Titus Howard.
Like, do you...
He has a Peters-esque background. He was a quarterback and tight end in high school, bulked up in college. He didn't test that well at the combine, but the Eagles used one of their visits on him already.
You know who also has a similar background to that? Lane Johnson.
He was a quarterback,
Right. And
those are the kind of guys, if you can get him in the 4th round...
I think he's going to go day 2. But yeah, I mean, just the buzz.
The way he tested on, that's why the only reason why I'm not sure he had pretty bad numbers. But
I mean, well, when you have one of those visits, it's typically
it's a good sign that you're interested.
That said, you look at somebody like Yadni Kajust, who was a terrible interview at the combine, but he's interesting to me.
I'm actually not convinced they're going to use day 1 or 2 pick on an offensive tackle.
I'm not either, but I'm
not saying they should or shouldn't, but
right. I'm not either. I just think like it's time. It's time.
Oh yeah, there's no question. By the way, the funny thing, like I don't know if you saw the picture the Eagles tweeted of Peter signing. He like did not look happy that they're taking a picture of him. He's not. I think somebody tweeted like he's probably not the guy that you take a picture of signing a contract where he's kind of losing money.
Yeah, I mean, and he's kind of like the only guy that is only happy looking when they win games. What, did you just see the John Brown deal?
No, that Anthony Barr reneged on his Jets commitment.
What?
Anyway,
congrats on the clicks, Jets guys.
Frank Gore type stuff right there.
Man.
All right, let's get into the big move that everybody was the most hyped on, though.
Oh, you mean Nate Sudfeld getting tendered the second round?
Nice, solid joke.
Yeah.
I know Sudfeld's your boy.
I was going to go with Wisniewski first, but my brain is going to...
All right, well, the Eagles are bringing back DeSean Jackson.
DJ.
This was kind of like just an idea that we've all floated out since it was like rumored that he didn't want to leave. Like, I don't know if any of us ever actually thought it would happen. Like, it's kind of crazy that it did, and the way it did. They wound up trading for him. Like, he's pretty much was updating throughout the day on Instagram. People thought he was released. They traded a 6th-round pick for him and also got back a 7th-round pick next year. It's Jason Light. I don't know why
he's terrible. He's the worst. Yeah.
I mean,
no, actually, that's not true.
I mean, you and I both agreed over the last day or so that the Eagles, within the first couple hours of free agency, filled their 2 biggest needs, which were deep threat and defensive tackle. Mm-hmm. And DeSean Jackson, he's 31, sure, but he averaged 18 yards a catch last year, which 32. Mm-hmm. He averaged 18 yards a catch last year, which was the best in the NFL. Mm-hmm. Like, he's not a Pro Bowl wide receiver anymore, but he's a clear upgrade over Torrey Smith, over Mike Wallace, and Jordan Matthews almost was like an outside receiver for them last year. So he's a pretty clear upgrade over them. He's defenses have to account for him. You saw some funny tweets from like Zach Ertz, and Carson Wentz was like, all right, here's what's going to happen. You're going to run straight ahead, and I'm just going to throw the ball as far as I can. Got it? Good. And Zach Ertz tweeted something funny about like how it's just going to open up the field for him too. It's like these guys are that's the biggest thing. And as of recording this podcast, they still haven't gotten a running back. That's the one hole. But outside of that, their their offensive starters have no holes in the lineup right now. As long as I
agree. So
as of right now,
so what I'll say about DeSean Jackson is people are going to talk about the stats. People are going to say he's a one-trick pony. Well, that one trick is very good,
and it's a trick they haven't had. Yeah.
Right. So he'll run a 9 or if you want to call it a go route. And he'll take the top off the defense. Safety coverage will have to be dictated towards him. That, in turn, will give Alshon Jeffrey one-on-one matchups. It'll allow Zach Ertz to run free with underneath routes. Same with Dallas Goedert. If DeSean Jackson has 3 plays of 18 yards, a game and opens up the field for everybody else, he is well worth the money that he is getting. It's a reported 3-year, $27 million contract.
You remember your first game you covered for us was the one where he single-handedly beat the Eagles and Nick Foles.
Yeah, I mean...
in Tampa Bay. He had like 2 50-yard touchdowns.
So I wanted to kind of tell you, because you brought it up about like how everybody kind of like wished this into the reality.
Yeah.
Or spoke it into
LeVar
reality.
Ball-esque stuff here.
Right. This is kind of like, you remember when the Blair Witch Project came out and everybody's like, well, is it real or is it not? Is it, you know,
like the movie itself.
Yeah, the movie itself.
Because of the way they filmed it, yeah.
And that's what the DeSean Jackson thing was for several years, and now they've just made this, like, the actual
because it has been like, because when he was a free agent, there was talk of him coming back here, too.
Right, we've heard about him coming back since he left.
Yeah,
I mean,
since Chip Kelly was fired, at least.
Yeah, I mean, so it's one of those things. I'm waiting for them to trade for LaShawn McCoy in a minute, but, this is, they'll trade, like, a travel thermos for him, but, again, I think, he's an interesting fit because if you look, John Brown, who was the guy to us that made a lot of sense at wide receiver, the Ravens wide receiver, just signed an identical contract.
With the by the way, DeSean restructured his contract, and now it's 3 years, 27. And I think the cap hit also will be like less than $9 million in the first year.
Right, he was set to make $10 million on the last year of a 3-year deal,
and it probably will amount to like a 2-year deal in reality.
Probably, and I think he gets $13 million in guaranteed money, so yeah, 2 years, it makes sense. I think it's a great move.
Yeah.
I really don't see any problems with it. Obviously, he left kind of unceremoniously the last time, but it's very clear that Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie think the world of him because he wouldn't be back if that was.
I think he's matured quite a bit, is my impression from afar.
Yeah, and you look at the numbers the last 2 years, it was a forgettable 2-year stint in Tampa Bay, but look at the turmoil at the quarterback position. Fitzpatrick and Jameis Winston switch places like you correct me during podcasts. I mean, it's really like, it was like a rapid thing.
He hasn't caught, with the Redskins, it was Kirk Cousins. Like, he hasn't caught with anybody like Carson Wentz since...
Well, and Kirk Cousins doesn't throw down the field.
Since Donovan McNabb. Like, he hasn't caught balls from anybody like that in a while.
Right, and I think...
Or Nick Foles, I should say.
And I spoke to a league source that told me that before he was traded, if he was available, he wanted to go to a contender because... He knows this is the twilight of his career. He wants to become this... he wants to win. He saw the Eagles win a Super Bowl. He wants to go do that. The other things that appealed to DeSean Jackson were the familiarity. Howie's here. Doug was the quarterback's coach when he was still here.
There are guys here. Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham.
Deuce Staley was the running backs coach when he was here. Yeah. There are guys that he
lineman,
There are guys that he knows. And then on top of that, you have Carson Wentz. So, all the reports that come out about him and being a bad teammate and all this other, guys want to play for him and play with him because, look, he's going to throw the ball down the field. He's one of the most physically talented quarterbacks in the league. I think he'll be the best talent that DeSean has played with at the quarterback position, in my opinion.
This might have been the best fit from DeSean's perspective, too, honestly, because he doesn't have to be like a team's number one receiver on the Eagles.
And he knows he's not. I mean, but now he doesn't have to compete for catches with guys like Adam Humphries and Mike Evans and all these other guys.
The Eagles spread the ball around. He'll get all the deep balls, yeah.
Well, and I think that he knows that Doug Peterson's creative enough that he can create opportunities for him, even if Nelson Aguilar stays. So, which that'll be a situation worth monitoring. I want to talk about the Stefen Wisniewski option thing. So that kind of coincided with Nate Sudfeld reportedly getting the second-round tender. They are literally taking the $3 million that they saved from Stefen Wisniewski
and allocating it there,
Yeah, to Nate Sudfeld.
We can talk about those in tandem, too.
Yeah, which we will, because I don't think they need to be talked about that much. Wisniewski, he's a backup interior offensive lineman at this point.
Well, like I said in the story I wrote about him, Cole Beasley signed with the Bills. I had the same reaction. I laughed. So Cole Beasley and John Brown 1 and 2. Good call, guys. Anyway, but
you lose out on Antonio. You gotta
the minute Stefen Wisniewski aired out his grievances on social media and in the media, he was done here. Like, that's just reality. You don't do that on this team, but they don't. He was a well-liked guy in the locker room, I think. He was a strange guy, but...
You always bring that up, how strange he is.
Dude, he would stare straight at his locker when the media would talk to him. He wouldn't look at anybody. It was the weirdest thing. Anyway, I mean, he was pretty good for them. They signed him to be a backup pretty much, and he became the starter when Seumalo struggled in 2017. He was a solid left guard for them on the Super Bowl run. He wasn't very good this last year, so he lost his job to Seumalo. He complained about it. Seumalo outplayed him the rest of the way. They pretty much drew a line in the sand. We're like, all right, we're going to keep Seumalo around here for a while, and then it became pretty clear that they were going to save the $3 million they needed to by getting rid of him. I thought maybe they probably did shop him around a little bit. Maybe there wasn't enough interest to actually do a trade, but.
Can I give you a point on that contract that he initially signed? So I actually broke that when I was still covering the Jaguars because he played for the Jaguars as well. He signed here for a 1-year deal, but when they re-signed him as insurance because Kelsey came off that bad year and he could potentially be the center. It worked out where he won the left guard job over Seumalo at some point during the Super Bowl run season, and he's a guy that they thought could be really good Kelsey insurance, which in turn he did become very good Kelsey insurance. Kelsey just blossomed into this great player again once he recovered from injuries, and I think it was a smart signing at the time. I think if you look at his history, his 3-year history in Philadelphia, that's got to be looked at as a real win for this franchise.
Yeah, and I will say they do need to. You don't need to spend a lot of money, but you need to bring in an interior offensive lineman now because I know they're high on Matt Pryor, but he was a 6th-round pick who didn't play. He was inactive most of the year last year, all besides one game or something. But I think they need to either sign a veteran or draft a rookie that they're confident can compete for playing time. Maybe both.
I think
unless you bring back their boy Chance Warmack again, I don't know.
Right. I mean, who knows? Who knows? I mean, I think they should sign somebody like a guy like Josh Allen, who played in Kansas City when Doug Peterson was there.
Jeff Allen.
Yeah. Sorry, did I say Josh Allen?
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh man, it's
all good.
It's the baby. Anyway, but yeah. So Jeff Allen makes a lot of sense to me. He can play center, he can play left guard, he can play right guard. He's been with the Texans. He's a guy that makes a lot of sense, I think. You look at the tackle depth. Jeremy Parnell, who was cut by the Jaguars, I think he could be a pretty decent swing tackle. He worked with Lane Johnson and Duke Manyweather last offseason, kind of always does. And then you look at the draft. I talked to Bobby Evans from Oklahoma, who said that Lane Johnson, as a freshman, taught him some technique stuff. So he's another guy to kind of watch.
Yeah. I mean, you can get a good offensive lineman. I mean, in the 5th round, 4th round, if you need, if you're just looking for a reserve, especially interior. That's kind of the range where the interior guys tend to go. And let's talk about the Nate Sudfeld as last one. There's not really that much. I mean, they're probably still going to sign a veteran to compete with him.
That's what I've been told.
But them giving him the 2nd-round tender is a pretty clear sign they at least intend to bring him back into the fold, which isn't that surprising. But the fact that it was 2nd-round tender, we started off thinking that, and then as it got closer, and we started, you reported that they wanted a veteran. I thought maybe they would just do the original round one, but this way they don't have to risk losing him for nothing, pretty much, I guess.
Well, and I think a repercussion of that is if you're a free agent quarterback who is high level backup, you realize, wow, this dude's making $3 million. Maybe I shouldn't sign here. Maybe they like him too much. So maybe that wards off some of those guys. That said, though, the restricted tender is isn't guaranteed. So I could cut him tomorrow.
Yeah. Unless he signs it.
No, even if he signs it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not official until I believe week 1.
Oh, wow.
So
they can cut him up to week 1, pretty much.
Yeah, because there was Ryan Davis in Jacksonville who got that contract and then never saw a penny of it because he was cut out of training camp. Look, I think they think the world of Nate Sudfeld, but they've got to hedge their bets. The backup quarterback position has become a premium position in Philadelphia. It's abundantly clear. Carson Wentz
getting paid.
I mean,
I meant Nick Foles, actually.
Yeah. Nick Foles turned
Carson Wentz will get paid.
But I think if you're an outside free agent, you're looking at this no brainer. Doug Peterson's brilliant. There's no
Carson
pressure
Wentz
on me.
Gets hurt all the time.
Yeah, it's one of those things where Carson's, I think, one of the most physically gifted quarterbacks the last 10 years. Can he stay healthy, though? And so if you're an agent and you're like, wow, I want to get my guy a decent payday, and I think he could have an opportunity with very limited pressure, hey, Philadelphia, what's going on? Because they will pay for that position. They've paid more for that position than they've paid for the linebacker position. Starters, you know what I mean? So it's somewhere they're going to try to invest, and I wouldn't be surprised if they drafted a quarterback if they don't end up getting the veteran that they want.
Yeah, I mean it's if Nate Sudfeld's your number 2 and, eventually they trade him for a pick or something, you want to have that developmental guy in the building already, even if it's a practice squad.
And what I will tell you is there were other teams that were closely monitoring the Nate Sudfeld tender thing, including his original team, the Washington Redskins. Yeah. Once they saw that second round tender, I think they kind of realized, that was...
Let's get Case Keenum instead, is what they said.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I mean, that was actually kind of the gist that was brought up to me. So, again, Nate Sudfeld's a guy with a bright future. I'm sure the Eagles are hoping they can A.J. Feely him at some point.
Hey, Teddy Bridgewater's turned down the Dolphins, so who knows?
Yeah, that's the thing to me. I brought this up, and I wrote this the other day. What if Nate Sudfeld's like the good alternative to draft? If you don't love this quarterback class and you're trying to tank, maybe you talk to the Eagles. Look, we're not going to send you a second round pick, but we'll give you a third and a seventh for him. And if he signs an extension midway through this year, you get a seventh next year for him. Like, to me, if I'm Howie Roseman, I'm calling around. Look, we put the second round tender on him. We really want a third or fourth round pick. Dolphins, what do you think? He's cheap. He doesn't prohibit you from drafting a quarterback high. Have this guy compete, come in. He's really talented.
Yeah. All right. We don't. Stuff happens every 10 minutes in free agency, so we don't want to talk too much about the future at the risk of saying something and then it changes. So we'll end on that note. We'll have another podcast later this week just talking about whatever else the Eagles do, because Howie Roseman has something else up his sleeve. Whenever he's silent for too long, there's something else coming. I know your whole Namdi silence bit.
Yeah, Namdi silence, baby. But what's weird is it's like I feel like every time we're on this podcast, it's like talking to somebody while they're on the phone in the car, and you're like, oh, please. The last thing I ever want to hear is like somebody get into a crash. You know what I mean? Like... Oh my God. So the last thing we want to see is like a massive breaking news story where it's like, oh my God.
Where it's like, oh my God.
We'd like to prepare, you know what I mean? I know it sounds like we don't prepare, but we do somewhat.
Somewhat.
Yeah.
All right. Actually, before we go, there was a few comments on our last podcast, and I said I would read some of them. I thought I had it pulled up, so yeah, I'm just stalling.
Like I said, we prepare. While he's doing that, it's something I wanted to talk to you guys about.
That's what they call classic.
And hopefully he's not traded or released while we're talking about this. But this morning I proposed a trade. The Eagles trade one of their fourth round picks for Darren Lee of the Jets. Now the Jets just paid C.J. Mosley a boatload of money to be their inside linebacker. They have Avery Williamson too there, who I think they like. So Darren Lee, former top 20 pick in 2016, could make sense for the Eagles from a middle linebacker perspective. He's one of the best coverage linebackers in the league as of last year. Had 3 interceptions, can make plays, really good blitzer as well, very quick. He runs a 4.47 at 6'1" and 232 pounds. I think he'd make a lot of sense, especially because he still has his 5th-year option available, which they could decide on by May. So essentially, and that's only guaranteed for injury. So essentially what the Eagles can do is they could have a 1-year audition with Lee, and if he balls out, they own his rights for that 5th year. They could try to work out an extension. Plus, he's on a rookie deal right now, so it's a first-round pick deal, but it's not that big of a hindrance. I think you want a guy at middle linebacker who has rare talent, and that's what Darren Lee has at the linebacker position because of his speed and his coverage ability.
All right, let's get into some of these comments. This was coming off our podcast we did after the Combine. AJG said, what do you guys think of DK Metcalf from Ole Miss? Do you think the Eagles should target him, maybe even move up in the draft? No, we have other needs, but this could be a guy, the next Megatron, and him and Wentz for the next 10 years would be amazing. Unless he fell to the Eagles, even then I'm not
I think
sure.
He's going top 10.
I do too, especially because of how much of a freak he is. And I don't think you shouldn't trade up for a wide receiver.
Yeah, I think it's bad business.
Yeah.
I think it's like drafting a running back top 10.
Yeah. You proposed a Nelson Aguilar for Duke Johnson trade on there. King Ocean Blue said, I would not trade Nelson for Duke Johnson. I'm not sold on Duke at all, and I hope Nelson signs a contract that reduces his cap hit rather extension or a 1-year deal.
I'd like for Nelson to be back as well. I think he's very good.
Yeah, and it seems like he's likely coming back, though it's possible he still gets moved. That's kind of a general statement. But didn't really.
Hey, maybe he'll go on, but hey, when you put it in print, sometimes that happens.
yeah, I mean, Duke Johnson, if he's available, he's a low-cost option. If you can give up a fifth-round pick for him, that's pretty great. Need to keep Nelly. He's a good player. He runs great routes. This is XX Furious Knight 6161. Gets open and can catch. Not to mention he's got good speed. I think he's a better fit in here in the slot than Tate was. You have to throw him the ball. He can't do anything if he doesn't get chances. I actually think he might get even less touches this upcoming season, honestly. For a guy going into free agency, that's not ideal for him, but he's a good weapon for them. The fact is, DeSean Jackson becomes their deep threat now. He was kind of their deep guy last year. They're going to use Dallas Goedert more often. When they do those 12 personnel, I don't imagine Aguilar will be on the field over DeSean Jackson.
Yeah, from Aguilar's perspective, I'd want to be traded now.
Yeah.
Especially on that one-year deal. If you could get more money, awesome. But I don't think it behooves him to stick around just because you see the way... I mean, this is developing into a 12 personnel offense. And at times, maybe even 13 personnel. So you're not really getting on the field that often. Aguilar's probably the most well-rounded wide receiver, I would say, talent-wise. The issue is I don't think he does anything particularly great. You look at Alshon Jeffrey, he can win one-on-one. He's got perfect size. He uses his size well. DeSean Jackson obviously has unrivaled burning ability. Aguilar's just a master of none, but a great all-around tool. And I think...
Why are you calling him a tool?
Yeah, I realized it when I said it. He's a great all-around wide receiver. But, again, I think that for Nelson to stay here, he has to get a full commitment from them from a playbook standpoint. You know what I mean? Like, there needs to be a plan here. The problem with the Golden Tate trade is... There was no... It doesn't seem like there was a plan.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll end on that note. Get back to free agency. Sure, some other weird stuff will be happening. As always, thanks for listening, guys. Make sure you subscribe. We're on all the apps. And leave us a comment. Tell us what you think about this free agency class or what you think about our thoughts about the free agency class. I'm sure you all disagree. But, again, thanks for listening, guys, and we'll talk to you soon.